Yo, what up guys, I'm Sammy and welcome back to the Soul Drop. And this is my first impressions look on the brand new Wade Shadow 7. So the Shadow line is a line that's kind of geared towards outdoor use. But also it's kind of like their budget team shoe as well. So this shoe retails for 120 bucks, and which I think is a pretty good price, especially for the performance that you're getting. Well, I mean from the previous models, but also the tech that you're getting is pretty dang good as well. So this is the Firework colorway. It actually is pretty clean. It's like a white, almost slightly off-white color, you know, and then we got some really cool colors here in the back of the shoe as well. So if you guys do want to cop, I try to leave in the free link in the description box. If you do choose to get this shoe, it does help me out if you buy it through the free link in the description box. And as always, thank you guys so much for all the support. And also, if you guys have any questions, you guys can always DM me over on Instagram. I try to get back to you guys, but I am sorry if I am a little bit late in replying. But yeah, let's get it started right off with the Traxione. So one thing that they switched up about the Shadow 7 is I feel like for the past couple of models, they have been using tough rubber. So that's why they were saying it's a little bit more geared towards outdoor use, but they're not really saying anything about the outsole, like compound, you know what I mean? They're not saying it's like tough rubber. They're just saying it's like a rubber outsole. However, we do have a pretty cool pattern. Oh, it actually makes a W, right? So it's like circles, and at the angles of the W, we got like circles. And then also on the circles, we have a little bit more tread, you know, like it's going parallel to the actual shoe. So we got like a micro tread on the actual W, which I think is pretty cool. So how is the traction so far? The traction seems pretty dang good so far. I mean, there's a pretty solid bite. However, this shoe has zero squeak right now. Of course, squeak has nothing to do with performance, but if you like to have a nice squeak in your hoop shoes, right now it's not squeaking at all, right? Hopefully once I break it in, it does start to squeak a little bit more, but again, we'll have to see on that. But right now, pretty much zero squeak, but pretty solid traction. In terms of dust pickup, it seems pretty good so far. I was wearing it around for a couple hours in my apartment before filming this video, and it seemed to be biting still like really well through dust. Even though it's weird because there's no squeak, but like the actual bite is very, very solid. It never really seemed to be sliding around too much, even though it's picking up like dog hair and dust. And of course, it's just my first impressions, and it's just on my wood floor. It's not the actual basketball court. I haven't played in these yet, but right now it's actually seeming pretty good for dust performance, which I am pretty happy about. And also, in terms of durability, I mean, again, it's not using tough rubber, but the actual grooves are pretty thick, and also the rubber's hard, you know what I mean? So I don't think it'll have too big of an issue handling outdoor courts. However, obviously the micro tread is gonna wear out really quickly, but the actual W part I feel like will be pretty good. So outdoor use I feel like will be pretty good. Again, like comparing it to older models that say it's using like tough rubber, I don't think it's gonna be as durable. However, so yeah, the traction overall seems pretty nice. And now moving on to the heel to toe transition, overall it's like really, really smooth, right? So there is a TPU anti-torsion piece, and it's saying it's like full length. Like I don't really understand 100% what they're trying to say. It says from the heel to the forefoot palm or something like that. But yeah, if it's heel to forefoot, I'm guessing it's like almost full length, kind of like the Shadow 6 was, right? So yeah, here in the heel, we have a crazy, look at this, crazy curve shape. So the shape is extremely nice, very, very smooth. And not only that, we also have a fully exposed foam here in the heel. Look at that. This is actually not rubber. This is all foam. They're using two different types of foam in this shoe. So here on the bottom, they're using Light Foam Ultra, and then here on the top, they're using Full Length Boom, of course. And there's a crazy amount of compression as well. So it's just really soft, very, very smooth here in the heel. And then coming here into the forefoot, we also have a nice curve shape. So it has a nice rocker shape, very, very smooth feeling. You guys already know, very, very typical of like, you know, most modern day basketball shoes, right? And then also it has a crazy amount of midfoot flex. Look at this. So it's like in the middle of the shoe, so it has a really like nimble feel, but torsion support is actually pretty nice. It's not as easy to like twist as like some other shoes, you know what I mean? So torsion support is pretty nice, but it's really easy to bend here in the midfoot. But then like here in the forefoot, it's a little bit harder, probably due to all this like rubber here in the forefoot on the lateral and also on the medial side, right? So I feel like because of that, it makes it a little bit stiffer here in the forefoot. But however, it's still a really smooth feel, right? It's not explosive, it's not stiff at all. It's very nimble, smooth, and flexible, and also really nice with the heel compression from the cushion. So there is a heel to toe transition. Moving on to the cushioning setup. So like I mentioned before, they're using a blend or a combination of full length Boom as well as Light Foam Ultra. So yeah, the Boom is right underneath your foot, right? And then we have kind of like a Light Foam Ultra frame almost, very similar to the Wade Flash 2. I feel like Wave Wade is using this combination a lot, right? So yeah, Light Foam Ultra is very soft, but then it has a pretty nice like structure to it. You know what I mean? It's still soft and offers a nice bit of compression, but it's not as soft as Boom. So that's why they use it as a structure so that you have a little bit more stability, right? So again, like I mentioned before, we still have a lot of heel compression, which makes the shoe extremely comfortable. But not only that, it has really good underfoot cushion, right? So in terms of core feel, however, the core feel is pretty nice. I would say it is a little bit higher up off the ground than, you know, shoes like the Sabrina 3 or the Luka 4s, which have really good core feel. However, I would say it's still like a little bit lower than average. You know what I mean? It's not terrible. So the core feel is better than average. You still get good core feel. And also in terms of the underfoot cushion, right? So first of all, the insole is actually quite nice. One thing that I do like about the details is that the actual insole, like on the bottom of it, has an identical pattern to the actual outsole pattern. So I think that's a nice little touch. But yeah, overall it's kind of soft, you know what I mean? It has a more of like a rubbery consistency rather than like an Ortholite foam insole where it's a little bit more spongy, you know? So I do like that, but it's not like super thick. It offers just a tiny bit of like step and comfort, right? But underneath that, of course, I feel like they're going away from like a very soft mesh strobel board, and they're kind of going more towards like foam strobel boards, you know what I mean? However, it's still soft, you know? It's not like super glued down. It doesn't seem like they glued it down and then like the actual material hardens and gets really stiff, you know? It's still soft, like just pressing with my fingers, there's still a crazy amount of compression, right? However, I feel like it's a little bit more stiff, just a tiny bit more stiff than like a soft mesh strobel, right? So I feel like maybe they changed it because some people were saying it's a little too soft, maybe, I don't know. But again, it's still really soft, right? So just putting this shoe on, the immediate step and comfort is still extremely nice. I really feel it, especially in the heel. It's really nice. And again, there's a great amount of compression, right? So combining that with the actual midsole compressing as well makes the overall cushioning setup in the heel really nice, like exceptional, right? So it feels like impact protection is gonna be great and all that. We'll have to see on if it's bouncy or not, but overall, you guys already know Boom is kind of bouncy, so I feel like once I play in it, it's gonna have a nice little subtle bounce, right? And the forefoot gets a little bit more dead, you know, you have a little bit more core feel, it's lower to the ground there, so it's not as much compression, but it's still like on the softer side of things, you know? And comparing to like, for example, I've been playing in like Kyrie's, you know, the Nike Kyrie's, you guys remember those? Just to get a little bit of nostalgia, I've been bringing like the Kyrie 2s and the Kyrie 3s. And yeah, it just made me like, I was like, dude, the cushion used to be so bad. You know what I mean? Like, well, how long is that? Like 8 years ago or something, 10 years ago or something like that? So yeah, coming from that to this, you know, I'm like, oh, this is really nice, especially also in the forefoot. So yeah, I feel like for like a budget team shoe, this is still a really nice cushioning setup, elite cushioning setup, you know what I mean? Again, the only thing is if I could, you know, nitpick, I would want slightly better core feel, but again, it's still nice for the core feel. So there is the cushioning setup. Moving on to the upper. So the upper is also pretty dang nice, but they are using a variety of materials, right? So they're saying this is like a fabric material, which is pretty interesting. And then around that, they're saying it's like a press film in high stress areas, right? So obviously high stress areas is like around the tip of the toe and also on the lateral side here in the forefoot. You know, you're gonna be doing a lot of lateral movements and stuff like that. So you need that, right? So like, yeah, a fabric material, textile, you know, mesh. It's really thin right here, right? So it's like pretty much, it's like a fully organic, you know, non-USDA certified, you know, like there's nothing else like going over this mesh material. It's just the mesh material, it feels like. Maybe there's like an underlaying material, but overall there's no film or anything, right? So it's like this really thin circular or like oval shape, you know? And then around that we have another kind of like film, right? And then around that we have another film, and it's like a really thin plastic, but then it's like pretty stiff, you know what I mean? And it says Ultra Shell. So yeah, this is the Ultra Shell material. I'm guessing that's the film part though, right? And then also on the medial side, they are using a synthetic leather material as well with this pretty cool pattern on it. So that also adds a little bit to the support as well, and also for the durability, right? So yeah, it's just tying it to fit. The fit is pretty weird as well, you know what I mean? Because like where the actual film is, it's like really tight. It's not forgiving at all. And then on top of your toes, like around here, it's really soft and forgiving, you know what I mean? So it's a pretty weird feeling kind of fit, or like for the upper as well, you know. But again, like it's really soft, ventilation's really good, there's a lot of airflow through that as well, and also through the bottom of the tongue with this mesh material. But then around that, it definitely does have a supportive and stiff feel. Again, that's where you need the support in the high stress areas, right? Coming here into the midfoot, it stays extremely thin, but it also seems to have an overlaying material, so we can see like a circular cutout, so that's like a textile material, feels like. And then over that, we have another kind of like that fabric material with some embroidered parts on it, which I think is a very nice premium touch. We also have the Wave Weight logo stitched there as well, right? Or I guess embroidered there. So yeah, you can see just how thin it is, but then it is a little bit more glued down, right? So it doesn't stretch at all, it feels a little bit more supportive there. And then on top of the tongue, we have these kind of like two circular spots that I feel like, you know, they're trying to make it look like there's like a foam pad or something, but they just stitched it there. And to be honest, it's like a really thin material. It's not super well padded, not super cozy. It's also a half booty construction tongue, giving you a better overall one-to-one fit, and it's obviously it's connected with that very open mesh material, right? Also for the laces, they're using the same exact laces as the Shadow 6, right? So it's like bulging out, so it's supposed to help with keeping the shoelaces tied. So when you tie it with these kind of like bulged shape, it's supposed to help keep the actual like loops in place, you know, obviously when you tie the shoes. But from my personal experience, it doesn't really help too much, you know what I mean? So I still have to double knot. And also it's kind of annoying, you know, trying to tie the shoelaces up, you know what I mean? It's not a huge deal, but it's a little minor thing for me. And then here in the ankle area, like on the sides, it's pretty minimal, and then it like gradually gets pretty thick, you know, once you get here into the actual back of the shoe, like where your Achilles is, and it does feel pretty nice and cozy there, right? There's also a nice cupping shape, and also we do have this like eyeball looking thing with the Wave Weight logo in the middle of it. You know, it's like translucent or like opaque, I guess, with this plastic material. Also, we have the Li-Ning logo, which I feel like Wave Weight shoes don't really use too much, you know what I mean? But if you guys didn't know, Li-Ning owns Wave Weight, right? Also, it says make your own way here on the Boom cushion as well. And also here on the lateral side, we have this kind of like plastic, you know, it's like an air bubble almost. So that's pretty cool as well. So overall, I feel like the quality isn't the greatest, you know what I mean? It's like a typical kind of like cheaper budget shoe model type of material, but it feels pretty nice on foot. It's like soft and thin, and also well ventilated where it needs to be, but also supportive in these high stress zones where it needs to be as well. But yeah, now moving on to the fit, that's where it kind of gets a little bit weird, right? So I went up half a size, and this shoe actually fits me pretty well. And I feel like that has to do with the padding being kind of thick, like at the back of the shoe, maybe, I'm guessing, right? Because right over here, I feel like because of the thicker foam, is pushing my foot forward a little bit, and the length actually is pretty nice. It's not like to the point where my toes are like right at the edge of the shoe. However, it's like kind of there, you know what I mean? I feel like just a couple centimeters of length, even though I did go up half a size, right? So yeah, it's the exact same fit for me, you know, as the Shadow 6 and the Shadow 6 V2. So if you've tried those shoes and you want the exact same fit, then go the exact same size in the Shadow 7. Obviously, they probably use the same exact glass. That's what I'm guessing, right? But yeah, so for me, length is good. For me going up half a size. Also, again, like it's pretty weird because at the tip of my toes, right, where this film is, because again, it's like this stiffer film, it's like really snug here, right? And then like right where my, like, I guess like my toenails are, you know? But then once you go into the middle of the toe box a little bit, you know, this mesh material is a little bit softer, it's a little bit more forgiving. So it's like tight here, and then kind of like, it's not loose, it's not roomy, but it's looser, yeah, and also like way more forgiving than this kind of like film material, you know what I mean? So here in the toe box, it's kind of weird, you know what I mean? And then for the width, it's like a normal width, you know what I mean? It's not like super narrow, it's not also not super wide. I would say like right over here, it's a little bit wide though, you know what I mean? So there, it's a little bit wide, and then it gets a little bit narrower, but it's like not squeezing the side of my foot too much, you know what I mean? So pretty much like normal width for me. So overall, I feel like most people should be fine going up half a size. However, we'll see how this material breaks in, right? Hopefully it doesn't get too roomy or anything. And if it does, I might have wanted to go like true to size. But you know, right now going up half a size is a nice fit. However, if you want it to be like a really snug fit, I feel like you should be fine going true to size, right? So there is the fit there. Moving on to the support in lockdown. Support in lockdown feels overall pretty good. However, because of the shoe's like ability to flex, you know, and also like the softer cushioning setup, this shoe overall feels a little bit more like nimble, you know what I mean? Like a really soft, flexible guard shoe type feel, like Nikes, you know what I mean? Like a Tatum 4, Luka 4, Sabrina 3, you know, Jaw 2 and stuff like that. So Yeah, in terms of the lateral containment, I feel like it'll be pretty good. You know, you do have the kind of like rubber coming up acting as the sidewall here in the forefoot, but also like this film material. And this film, again, is pretty stiff, but also we'll have to see on how it breaks in, right? But right now, again, it is on the stiffer side of things. And then here in the heel, we do have this external heel counter as well as an internal one, so it feels like lateral containment is going to be good, and it feels like the overall upper is pretty supportive or adequate for support, you know what I mean? But obviously this shoe is not like super duper supportive, not super stiff feeling at all. So I feel like for most people, again, if you're a guard or if you're used to shoes that feel similar to like the Tatum 3, Tatum 4, Sabrina 3, then you're gonna have a very similar feel in this shoe. However, I would say this has a little bit more cushion, you know? Also for lateral stability, it does feel pretty nice so far. You do have a pretty wide base, nothing crazy in terms of like an outrigger, you know? And then overall, there is a nice cupping shape with the foam. So for the overall support and lockdown, again, it feels very similar to like the Sabrina 3s and stuff like that. Maybe just a tiny bit more stiff and just a tiny bit more supportive feeling than like the Sabrinas, right? So there is the support and lockdown there. Moving on to the weight of the shoe. This shoe feels like average weight. You know, it doesn't feel super heavy, also not super light. Yeah, pretty much average weight. 12.5 ounces. Let's check the other shoe. 12.6 ounces, right? I would actually say that's a little bit heavier than average, right? So for the past like year or two, shoes have been getting extremely lightweight. And the old average, you know, used to be 12.5 ounces, right? But nowadays, you know, for the past like year or two, again, shoes have been getting light, and the new average is around 12 ounces. So yeah, it's slightly like, you know, half an ounce heavier than normal, right? So yeah, however, it doesn't feel like super like average. It actually feels a little bit lighter than average on foot, because I feel like, you know, the upper is just really thin and minimal. It's thin and minimal, but like a little bit stiff in some spots because of the film, but I feel like this will break in and get a lot softer, right? So there is a weight there. Moving on to the aesthetics, I feel like it looks pretty good. I definitely do like this colorway. However, I don't think it's like my favorite, you know what I mean, from Wave Wade. My favorite right now definitely is probably the WOW 12 and also the 8085 Ultra V2, right? So now wrapping things up, the Shadow 7 actually feels pretty dang solid, especially for the price, right? The thing that really stood out to me is the cushioning setup. You don't really find cushioning setups this nice, especially for the underfoot cushion for like 120 bucks, right? So the cushion feels extremely nice. Again, we'll have to see on how the traction breaks in, but right now it feels pretty dang good. The upper feels minimal, you know, and also I would say just this shoe overall feels extremely similar to the Shadow 6, right? So again, if you've tried the Shadow 6, then I feel like you'll really like the Shadow 7, right? So anyways, that about concludes my first impressions look on the Wade Shadow 7. Again, if you guys do want to cop a, try to leave in the free link in the description box, but that's it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.